now that we are nice and loose and we are warmed up, thank you, Pastor Wayne, for joining us on the couch for a very relaxed sit down. I think this is going to be, but I think it's important for guys to know. And also, guys, we had Reverend Kenneth Meshu on one of the YouTube channels. You can go and just Google Convo on YouTube, and you'll find the YouTube channel he was on. I think they've already had about 37,000 views.
Yeah.
And he had a great long 2-hour session there. And what was nice about that is he told people a little bit about who he was as a boy, almost becoming a soccer star, and how good he was with all athletics and everything that he had been through. And I think that opened a lot of people up to realize that you guys are not just president of ACDP and deputy president of the ACDP, but you're also a father, you're a pastor. Your wife Leona is sitting right next to you over there on the couch, off frame. She doesn't want to be in frame, but she is right here as backup, and to give, I suppose, the laser eye just in case Pastor Wayne says something about it that he's not supposed to. But it's good to have you sitting on the couch with me and just having a nice discussion to find out who you are, what you do, some of your viewpoints as a father, as a husband, and then also discuss a little bit, I suppose, about politics in South Africa and things that are going on in the country at the moment regarding our school kids and everything like that. So, Pastor Wayne, thank you for coming. Thank you for making the trip from Somerset West to Rondebosch.
It's an absolute pleasure.
And let's start off with this. Who is Pastor Wayne Thring? Where do you come from? Where do you stay now? Where do you call home? What schools did you go to? And maybe I might just pop in a question or two while you're busy talking.
Well, I grew up in a middle income family. Perhaps at times it was also below income when Dad wasn't working. A mother who was a stay-at-home mum. Dad was a bricklayer. Grew up in a place called Sydenham, just some 5 k's outside of Durban. Born in Browns Avenue, grew up in Knight Road for the first 15-16 years of my life. We then moved to Newlands East, and from Newlands East we moved to Marion Ridge. Obviously, all of this was during the apartheid era. The schools that I attended, I was at Sydenham Infants, and then Sydenham Primary. High school went to Ambilo, which was down in the Durban area, so we had to either cycle to school or get onto the bus. So I did much of my transport to school was cycling at the time. And from Ambila I went to Besha High School. From Besha High School it was Besha College. I did register to go to UKZN, but Dad didn't have the funding at the time. I managed to pull together the 10 Rand registration. I remember very clearly the 10 Rand registration fee at the time,
10 Rand.
1979. I scraped it up.
I was 1 year old then, Pastor Wayne, and yet we look the same age, guys. I mean, how crazy is this?
So I scraped that up and was hoping that the funding would come for my varsity education, but the funding wasn't there. And so was offered at the time. The teachers said, look, there's another option. You could go to college and do teaching at Beshe Teachers Training College. So 1980, after completing my matric, it was Beshe Teachers Training College.
So you're a qualified teacher?
I am. I'm a qualified teacher. I taught for from 1984. I resigned in 1997. So taught for some 14 years, mathematics and science. So those were my
I think we're talking about the wrong subjects today. I think we should be focusing more on what you did as a teacher. So you grew up in the apartheid years. You obviously were a little bit older than me in those years because I was born in 1978. I know the people can't even remember that far back. But I was really in primary school when you were actually going into your teaching career.
Correct.
How were things? I mean, when you say you traveled on the bus to school, how were things in the apartheid years for you traveling on a bus to school? I mean, was it a mixed bus, or was it just for the colored people, or was it just for anyone that wasn't white? Did you guys have to sit at the back of the bus? What kinds of things? Because the kids that are born post 2000 now, our Gen Zs, they don't know anything about this kind of stuff, and the stuff that they do know is often skewed. So, for you, what was your experiences going on the buses, and then also your teaching experience where did you teach as a non-white, if you don't mind me saying that?
No, not at all.
Teacher, because people don't realize that there's a big difference, even though our country is down the tubes now, and things might be a little bit reversed. But not much has really changed compared to those days.
Well, in the Sydenham area, it was a very cloistered, if I could put it that. Obviously, growing up as from birth to about 16 years old, it was very cloistered, very protected. And it was what was then the reality for us as a kind of closed colored community.
Yes.
But as you began to mature, you realize that you've got some neighbors further up that looked somewhat like you.
Yes.
And they didn't mix with us, and you weren't allowed to actually go there. So traveling on the buses, it was predominantly black, colored, and so-called Indian folk. That we had to take a bus if we were going into town, into Durban, the city. It was then they were called Indian buses.
Yes.
And then you also had the green buses, which was the corporation buses, Durban corporation buses. So those were the modes of transport. Or you use what we would call ND10, which is using your feet as a mode of transport if you didn't have bus fare. So as a child, I had to walk probably about 3 kilometers or so every day to school, 3 there and 3 back, or run, because where we were in Sydenham, in Knight Road, the school was right at the bottom of Randall's Road, going more towards Hippo Road, if you know, where the waste dump currently is,
yes.
Kennedy Road. So we had to walk that distance and then walk back or run. Often when our parents had the finances, they would give us 2 cents bus fare at the time. And but with that 2 cents, you'd say, no, I'd rather save this because I'd be able to get maybe a 1 cent Coke and a donut,
Yes.
So you'd kind of save that money to get yourself a treat and rather walk to school or run to school. So that's kind of growing up, but later on we also began to realize, as I said, as you started growing up during the apartheid era, you began to realize that there was something that was not right. We would also, as friends, would go to the beach during the school holidays, and that's where you kind of saw the segregation.
The public areas outside of your
That's
community.
where you saw, and then also when you'd go into Durban, again you would see the segregation. There were benches there that would would say. In Afrikaans, nie blanke nie. So that's where that's where you'd need to sit, and then there were the ablution facilities, very clearly whites only and others, and non-whites. So then you began to realize, but why is there this segregation? So you'd see it in the restaurants. You couldn't go into certain restaurants. You couldn't go into certain ablution facilities. You couldn't take certain buses. And even if you were walking through certain areas, you kind of felt threatened.
Yeah.
If you had to walk through a particular white residence, it was almost as if you were an intruder in your own country.
Yes.
Which is what caused me in my college years, late matric year, into my college years, to join the United Democratic Front.
Okay. So you were UDM back in the day.
I was a UDF. I became a UDF leader, a youth leader. When that time now I was in Newlands East, and worked with some of the top notch members that are still with the ANC. I don't want to mention their names because I don't want to give them that unnecessary airtime. So I worked with some of the top notch guys within the UDF at the time, and now also they're with the ANC. But in 1984. When I started teaching, I gave my heart to Christ. Okay. And so I came to Christ. I picked up the phone. I called my then mentor in the UDF, who was in Newlands East, and I said to him, Trevor, I've given my heart to the Lord. I'm now in the church. I'm leaving politics behind. So from 1984 to 1995 was a period where I was being unschooled.
Yes, which is a good thing.
All of the stuff that I had picked up in my so-called rebel years and fighting against the establishment and fighting against apartheid, and in a sense, it was building up a hatred towards white people.
Yeah.
And the Lord had to take all of that out and begin to put His love into my heart from 1984 to 1995.
Sure.
1995, while studying, so in 1984 to 1995, I immersed myself in ministry. I did, street evangelism, bus evangelism, train evangelism. I got involved within the youth ministry, in the Sunday school ministry. And then I became a deacon in the church and an elder in the church and then an assistant pastor right up until 2010, until finally I became the pastor. So one church also, 1984, that's where I gave my heart to the Lord, came to the church in 1984, and I'm still there today. So I immersed myself in ministry right up until 1995. So while studying in the local church, I picked up one of the books by Sheldon, In His Steps.
Yes.
The www. What Would Jesus Do? And I became convicted about my non-involvement in terms of transforming our communities socially, and felt the need to become, I felt the Lord impressing upon my heart to become involved politically again.
Yeah.
But this time I felt that it was going to be different. And I said, okay, Lord, if this is you speaking to me about getting involved in politics again, then you send somebody to the church. You send somebody to me. I'm not going to go out there and wave my flag, say, here I am, I'm ready now for politics. And so the very next day, after I prayed that prayer, I was studying towards one of my degrees in the church, and the very next day, Brother Simon Haynes, one of our neighbors in Marenridge, we were now in Marenridge and just recently married. 1995 would have been 5 years married. And so the very next day after I prayed that prayer, Simon Haynes comes to the church and he says, hey, Pastor Wayne, the ACDP is having a meeting in the community hall. Don't you want to attend? And at first I said, Simon, I'm too busy, Brother Si. I'm too busy. I've got my exams coming up and, maybe later. And he kind of stood there. He just kind of stood his ground. He says, please, won't you come? And the Lord reminded me, what did you say yesterday?
Yes.
What did you pray?
Yeah.
And so I'm sending somebody to you. So I said, okay, Brother Si, I've got 1 hour during my lunch break. I'll come up for 1 hour. I sat right at the back of the community hall. Trish Jalbert and Gavin Stone were sharing about the ACDP. There was a handful of people, maybe 10 or so people that were there. I sat right at the back. When they finished, I thought I'm just going to run away. Gavin asked, please, the man at the back, the gentleman at the back, will you please close in prayer for us? When I opened my eyes after praying, he was standing right next to me. He invited me to the next ACDP meeting, and the rest, as they say, is history. So
okay, so that's crazy, because you know what, I remember, and this is supposedly white privilege, and I just want to say this because this is where people get the wrong idea sometimes, and that's why separating us on color and not culture is where I think society gets things wrong.
Sure.
Culturally we're all different.
Sure.
Indians have their own culture.
Sure.
Zulus have their own culture. Xhosas have their own culture. That's got nothing to do with their skin color.
Absolutely.
And South Africa is so, even now today, so focused. I mean, I remember as a small boy growing up in a broken home with the father who was abusive. We had no money for anything, and I had to turn to crime at a very young age. Even though I was a church boy, I didn't have a relationship with Jesus back then. I was just being dragged to church by my mom because church was a thing that we had to do.
All right.
But I had to travel 15 k's to my school. It would have been such a pleasure for me to just walk 3 k's to my school. My mom bought me a bicycle from when I was in class 1, class 2, and said, right, you don't have to take the bus anymore because we can't afford it. There's your bike. Cycle 15 k's to school and 15 k's back.
Wow.
And that was the closest school I could go to.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that there were non-white schools closer in my areas that I could have probably gone to, but I wouldn't have been gone there because my dad would have said to me, how can you go to a school like that because you are white and they are not white? And I remember in high school having friends, and I don't know what it was. I was drawn to the non-white people as friends. I just found white people were in those days too stuck up, walked around, and I'm generalizing here because it's not. This is my perception, guys, my point of view, not anyone else's point of view. And I was drawn to the black guys because at the same time as me looking at them strange, they were looking at me strange. And the thing is, I was a basketball guy. I know that I'm pretty short, but I got my provincial colours for basketball. And in those days, there weren't a lot of, maybe it's because white men can't jump. I don't know.
But you proved them wrong.
Yes, I had a lot of black friends, a lot of coloured friends. I spent times in the community courts that were built outside of the white areas, playing basketball on a Saturday from sunrise until sunset and then cycling home.
Yeah.
I used to walk through Ghost Town in Pietermaritzburg as a white guy, and people used to look at me and go, but Ghost Town, what on earth are you walking through there? Why are you in Copesville? Why are you in Raysthorpe? Why are you in Northdale? Why are you in well, that's where we played basketball. Mbali, section unit 13, whatever you want to call it. Even now, I don't like calling, I mean, I've been in Phoenix for 5 years, living in Phoenix, working with the Indian community. I don't like calling units, you know, and I say to all of my Indian friends, if you're living in Sanford, you're living in Sanford, it's not unit 10. If you're living in Redfern, where I have got a place now, it's not Unit 15, it's Redfern. Units are this crazy political term that they use to divide things up with. And I know that it's been ingrained in the system, but I try and say to the young guys, stop it. You live in a suburb of Phoenix. And I was shocked. I mean, when I moved into Phoenix, and I probably still am probably one of the only white guys living in Phoenix, I didn't realize, I still, you know, when they throw around the word township, location, when I moved into Phoenix, I was like, what? This is not a township or a location. This is the second largest Indian community living outside of India anywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
It's just a whole lot of Indian people, the Indian businesses. The streets were clean, beautiful houses, shopping centers. And I was like, where is this a township? Come now, this is just a group of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and then
it's a pity that we still have these kind of categorizations, you know, Vaughan, after you know, some 30 years of so-called democracy. By the way, when I got into that meeting, the first ACDP meeting in 1995, the two people that were presenting were white people, Trish and Gavin. And Gavin and I are still very, very close friends up until today. Trish had moved over to the UK with her husband, and she's just back now, so we're kind of connected, and we kind of more just chat on WhatsApp. But the Lord also connected me with some very, very beautiful white people like yourself.
I'm Indian inside, guys, by the way.
And I have some extremely good friends from the so-called other side of the fence, which breaks down, I think, a lot of the biases that we developed and the stereotypes that we developed as children, kind of growing up. And this is what needs to happen. And I think that as believers, we have to be intentional about breaking those biases and breaking those stereotypes. And it's absolutely amazing that you are able to go and spend time in Phoenix, and that you are able to go and spend time in Ghost Town and Copesville and so on in Pietermaritzburg. Some of the areas when we kind of just gave our hearts to the Lord, we would go to, you know, to meetings in those areas.
I was doing all the nonsense there, but I wasn't doing all the good stuff.
Well, you know, but still, it's kind of breaking. I'm talking about breaking the stereotypes that, you know, you got to stay in your separate areas. And I think for me, it's sad that after 30 years, we still kind of reference, you know, the townships and the units and the black, colored, white, Indian kind of thing. We've got to break down those racial stereotypes and those racial tags and move to a place where we are called South Africans.
Yes.
We are children.
You're
we
not
are
a
children
coloured
of
South
God.
African. I'm not a white South African or a black South African. We are South African.
We are South Africans.
100%.
We are children of God.
Yeah,
and I think that I long for the day where we are able to actually move away from those stereotypes and become who God called us to be and unite ourselves as God intended it to be. But growing up in the Sydenham area, there were some precious memories, you know, precious memories in that I was also very involved sports-wise. I played soccer. I got my colours for KZN.
So were you good? Were you as good as Reverend Kenneth? This is the question that everyone wants to know.
Well, you know, I got my KZN colours in primary school. I captained the soccer team at a school level. I was the vice captain at the local team. And thereafter I picked up some injuries from soccer and went into cycling. My brother says I was a natural cyclist. He was a South African cyclist. So I went into cycling.
I can see you being a cyclist, but you've got that look of a cyclist.
Well, I've just come back into cycling. So I've completed 2 Amashovas. And my second Amashova that I did last year, second in my category. So the over 60 category in the last Amashova that I did last year. Yeah. I am over 60.
Okay.
But then I also played table tennis and captained the table tennis team. We came down from Durban up here to Bellville, where there was the inter-college sports competitions that we held, and I captained the table tennis team. So I found that, in fact, it's like with most sports that I kind of put my attention to, I kind of gravitate, and I'm able to develop if I give attention to a particular sport. So that's kind of where I am sports-wise.
Here's a question, because now you've spoken about your history, where you come from, your years as a Christian, when you got saved, you were working as a teacher, you went to an ACDP meeting and slowly started getting into politics. Why should Christians even bother about politics?
Vaughan, I think it's absolutely essential that as Christians we focus and we get involved politically. Some people say that politics is a so-called dirty game. And so stay out of politics. But Christians do not absent themselves from reaching out to those who are caught in brothels. Christians don't absent themselves from those who are involved, perhaps as an alcoholic, as a drug addict, involved in some nefarious activities. Yeah. They get themselves dirty by going to those places and ministering the gospel to them. Yes. And I think that it's a bit of a lie and a bit of a misnomer to say that we should not get involved in politics. If anything, that is one of the most important places that Christians ought to become involved in. And the reason is that is where legislation is made and legislation is passed that affects almost every area of your life. When your child goes to school, the type of curriculum that your child is taught and the content that is fed to your child at school, at a local school level, is dependent on who the individuals are within the Department of Education at a national level who determines the type of content that goes and feeds your children at a local level. Almost even within the local church, how a church ought to. And I remember what the CRL attempted to do. The CRL attempted to, they were looking at controlling the church and passing legislation and getting the churches to register with government so that the churches could almost kind of be controlled. And there were many churches who would say, hands off the church. Government, this is not your domain. This domain is a domain that belongs to the Lord himself, and you take your hands off the church. And so there's attempts also to control and to manipulate the church. And then you also have legislation, you're talking about the hate speech bill, where it is possibly going to come to a time, if the church does not wake up, it could come to a time where legislation will limit what you are able to speak from and preach from the Bible. Because what you are saying from the Bible could potentially be considered to be hate speech.
Yes.
And so if the church does not wake up, if the church does not arise, if the church does not become involved politically, then it may be too late for the church to say, but we didn't see this. Why weren't we warned? The ACDP has for the last 30 years been warning the church in terms of the content and the types of curriculums that are coming. We saw this coming from Europe. When I was still teaching, by the way, I spoke out against outcomes-based education.
Yes.
This wasn't necessarily in terms of the sex education content, but it was purely because in the United States, in the UK, in Australia, in the other parts of Europe where OBE was used, they considered it the dumbing down of the nation.
Yes.
And so when children in the United States and these first world countries where OBE was used, when children went through the OBE process, At the end of 12 years of schooling, many of them weren't even able to spell their own names.
Yeah.
Many of them couldn't read. And so Kader Asmal came in, and he was then the then Minister of Education, introduced outcomes-based education to our schools, and we now are suffering the legacy of that kind of educational system, curriculum that was introduced to South Africa, where our kids are still... You look at the Pearls study that was done 2023, I think, which is the Pearls is the progressive international reading and literacy survey that they do. Our children, our grade 4s, after spending 4 years at school, 81%, over 80% of our grade 4s are unable to read with meaning. They are functionally illiterate when it comes to mathematics. So, literacy and numeracy. Our children are amongst they are in the bottom percentiles, almost second to last.
Yeah.
In terms of numeracy and literacy. It is because of the quality of the education, and those are decisions that are made at a national level. Now, this is what the Word of God says. It says in the book of Proverbs, righteousness exalts a nation.
Yes.
Sin is a reproach to any nation. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice.
Correct.
But when the wicked are in authority, the people mourn. So we have a choice. We have a choice. The Bible talks about righteous people being in authority. Those who know God. The Jethro principle in Exodus 18. Exodus 18 speaks about the Jethro principle. When Jethro comes to Moses and he says, now Moses, listen to me. Choose able men, trustworthy men, men who hate dishonest gain, and men who fear God.
Yes.
And you put them in charge of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens in order to make yourself, and let them be the judges over the people. Now, who do we put as judges over the people? Who do we put? Who is it that we have in those senior positions right now who are making legislation on our behalf?
Yeah.
Do we hear South Africans mourning at the moment? Do we hear the groan of the millions of South Africans? Well, it is as a result of who we have in that position of authority. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. When the ungodly are in authority, the people mourn. And we within the ACDP, we have said, we can hear the mourning, we can hear the groaning. We've been chatting, just before coming here, about what is currently happening in Durban,
Yes.
in eThekwini.
Yes.
And the groaning of the people in eThekwini. The complaining, the people who are saying we are being used as pawns. The politicians are fighting in eThekwini, and we are suffering. So right now you've got huge swathes of eThekwini. No electricity, no water, the refuse is not being collected.
And this is not just in the poorest areas, it's affecting every area.
Across the board. And this is as a result of the politicians who are currently there, who have no idea that they have been placed in those positions as servant leaders. Yeah. The ACDP understands servant leadership. Yeah. We understand the principle of serving God's people. We understand, this is what Jethro said. He spoke about men and women who fear God. Now, if you have people in those positions of authority who do not fear God, do you think that they're going to have any fear for man? Do you think that there's going to be any respect for man? If they do not respect God, will there be any fear or respect for their fellow man? No, they're going to be there as those who want to enrich themselves.
Correct.
They're going to be, these egotistical, self-serving individuals who are there only for themselves. Not so with us within the ACDP. We understand the principle of servant leadership. Vaughan, look at our history. Look at the history of the ACDP, the 30 years. 30 years, no scandals. 30 years of respect. 30 years, a clean history. And this is what the ACDP presents to South Africans.
But that means, yet over those 30 years, Pastor Wayne, I can just recount over the last maybe 10 or 15 years, because I haven't been in politics that long, but I've been now trying to help the ACDP in a small capacity, especially in eThekwini with Jamil Isop, one of our local councillors there.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to see more and more of this. And that, you guys are above reproach for sure, definitely for the last 30 years. But it doesn't mean people haven't tried to character assassinate you.
Sure.
But yet, none of it is stuck.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's the guys have pointed fingers and made accusations, but you guys are still exactly who you were as a founding party based on biblical principles.
Well, for 30 years, when the ACDP was established in 1993, contested the elections in 1994, first democratic elections in South Africa, many people said that the ACDP is not going to amount to anything, a party just established some 100 days before the first democratic elections. So we had the critics and the cynics and the skeptics and so on who said, this so-called Christian fundamentalist party, right-wing is what we were labeled, a right-wing party, they're not going to amount to anything. Well, we confused our critics and skeptics, and we got 2 national seats and I think 3 provincial seats at the time. We grew up to 2009 to 7 members of parliament, and we had about 5 or 6 provincial members of parliament. We had councillors in all 9 provinces. We still have councillors in all 9 provinces, structures in all 9 provinces. And then we went through a bit of a political wilderness period in 2009 with the floor crossing legislation. It hurt us. Yeah. It hurt us where some members crossed over. They were enticed by different political parties and other incentives. And so some of them crossed the floor, and it hurt us. So from 2009 to 2014 was our political wilderness experience that we went through. And then there were lots of criticism, lots of fingers that were pointed, but there was the core group of our voter base that still believed, that understood the vision of the ACDP, that yes, while there were those who may have joined with their own motives, and were enticed by the ruling party and by other incentives, there's this core base within the ACDP that said, we know the vision, we know that God has established this party for a purpose, and we're going to continue to vote. And it's that core base that continued to vote for the ACDP. 2014, just over 100,000 votes. That kept our 3 national members of parliament. But in 2019, we started to see the increase. The party grew by just over 40%. We had about 146,000 votes from just over 100,000. And in 2021, the local government elections, over 200,000 votes. So what we are seeing now is an uptick in the support for the ACDP. By the way, in our local, the last manifesto launch that we had up in Johannesburg, at the Ellis Park Arena, it was the best, it was the most vibrant, the most exciting, the biggest manifesto launch ever in the history of South Africa, the history of the ACDP rather. We've had provinces, all 9 provinces, people traveling in buses overnight, the excitement, just the sense that the ACDP is no longer a small party. That auditorium was filled to capacity. It was overflowing. We had some hitches where some buses also arrived a bit late, but nonetheless it was such an exciting, fantastic time for the ACDP to showcase to South Africa that despite the challenges, despite the political wilderness period that we had to go through, the accusations and that sometimes even internally from some of your own, those that you kind of worked with who because of differences decided to badmouth us or leave us and go and establish their own political parties, the ACDP has held their own, and we are so thankful for the vision and the visionary that we have in the Reverend Dr. Kenneth Meshwe, a man who understands what it is to serve God, fear God, and keep his eyes as a flint on the vision and not become distracted. We thank God for the visionary that we have in our leader.
So, guys, this is the perfect segue. Pastor Wayne is more natural at this than I am. As you can see, this is probably the least you've heard me speak ever sitting on a couch and doing a podcast for you guys, which is awesome. I don't really like speaking. Normally, I only try and speak because the guy that I'm sitting with needs to sort of think about what he needs to say. But you can hear Pastor Wayne's heart here just in this first 40 minutes. And Pastor Wayne's done the perfect segue. So we're going to go into the second segment very, very soon. And we're going to discuss a little bit, just touch on, for those that don't understand, what the ACDP manifesto is and what it consists of, so that you guys can get an idea of what that is. and get an idea as Christians why you should be voting and who you should be voting for, because like Pastor Wayne discussed, and he spoke about the Jethro principle, with Jethro going to Moses and putting men of integrity and that in power. You can go to the savotersguide.org.za website and look at the first thing that you read there when you read it. It is exactly what Pastor Wayne has been speaking about, and we've got 2 really good articles there that you can look at as a Christian to see how to vote. But we'll be back now. Guys, the reason why we're sitting down and having these conversations, and I'm going to be going a lot more in depth in this on a lot more content that we're doing for a whole lot of national radio stations. But just so that for those guys that might go, but Vaughan, stats are not that important. Let me just explain to you guys a little bit about what is going on in South Africa at the moment and why we say these things are so important. Because it's important to realize that the young people in our country are in... You think Durban is in a bad place, and let me tell you, Durban isn't a bad place. We discussed this. But the state of our hearts, the state of our young people's minds, and the way they see themselves with little worth, not knowing that they're special or have a purpose or know where they're going or where they come from, because of this whole thing that you talked about being dumbed down. I mean, I remember when I was in school, my English teacher always used to say to me, Mr. Neville, if you're ever watching any of my content, you're probably a little bit older than me now, but he always used to say to me, Vaughan, don't ever feel scared to question your teachers and your lecturers. Ask them the questions, disagree with them, and get them to argue back to you about what they are telling you in the classroom. When you do that now in the schools, it's like, no, you must sit down, shut up, and keep quiet, and just listen to what I have to say. And sometimes the teachers have got their own personal agendas now that they're pushing onto the kids.
Sure.
And that's another podcast for another day, because, guys, I'm going to be doing a complete series on gender and gender reclassification. And you can wait for that, because I'm going to have all the experts, all the guys. We're going to be speaking to some of the local celebrities, and we're going to be speaking to the church. We're going out to UCT, and we're going to be speaking to students and doing all sorts of things to get an idea of what people actually think about this whole gender reclassification. And is it really as crazy as we think it is, or is it just a passing phase? But we are going to get all the stories and everything for you guys. But guys, listen to this. We're talking about pregnancy stats now in South Africa, and we're talking about pregnancy stats for girls aged 14 to 19. And I know Pastor Wayne is in politics, he knows this as well as I do. And I'm using stats that we've collected as a nation from 2018 to 2022, so that these are verified stats. We do have slightly updated stats as well for 2023 and 24. But when I started looking into this and realizing that teenage pregnancies have increased exponentially over the last 20 years. And pregnancy under the age of 19, we had around between 90,000 and 150,000 girls pregnant under the age of 19 that were registered mothers in schools. Which means that's actually the lower end of the figure. There's a lot more.
Sure.
Then you take that down a few notches and you go to girls between the ages of 10 to 14. Now already... Like your reaction, and this is the reaction I want from the people. You go, but wait, 10 to 14. 10 to 14 is young. Over 5,000 girls have been registered as mothers between that age. It's a 48% increase. Where is the education here? What is going on? Because the government keeps saying that they're trying to help to combat this, but when you're teaching kids at the age of 11 how to use condoms and how to have sex the right way, and then, if you do fall pregnant and the condom fails, you can then go for an abortion. Is that the right way to really go about it? I'm just going to leave this open-ended, because we're going to be discussing the ACDP manifesto. So I just want to leave you guys with this. 17 years and younger, 33,000 girls pregnant. We go girls aged 10, 11 and 12. Just over 600 children were registered, and I'm calling them children for a reason, because Pastor Wayne, that's what they are. Thank goodness I have not seen this myself, but I can't picture in my mind an 11-year-old girl with an 8-month pregnant baby tummy. I get cold. You can see the goosebumps on my arm. I freak out, because how are you even supposed to call that person a mother? Because she's still a child.
That's what she's
still a child. It is absolutely crazy. And then you go and you look at the statistics, and guys, I use the statistics from the Guttmacher Institute and the WHO, because they are secular organizations that I can't be said, but Vaughan, you took this from a website that is pro-Christian and they've distorted the statistics in order to match their philosophy. This is coming from the Guttmacher Institute, which is an institute set up by the pro-abortion movements across the world to monitor how many girls have abortions yearly. And according to them, South Africa has on average, and I back this up with a conference that was held, and you can go onto the SA Gov website, the article is still up there from 2018, where they had this conference in the Eastern Cape, and they discussed why the Termination of Pregnancy Act has failed. What have they done wrong? Because they said in this, and the Guttmacher Institute backs it up, they said 260,000 girls annually in South Africa are having abortions illegally. Now, we're not talking about the legal abortions now. We are talking about girls, even though we've had abortion legal, Termination of Pregnancy Act since 1997, and you can go to any clinic, any government hospital. You don't have to have consent from your parents as a young girl under the age of 16. You can just fall pregnant quietly, run quickly to the clinic, get rid of that baby, and you're told no emotional baggage, nothing's going to happen to you. Our mothers not supposed to be nurturers. They're not supposed to be murderers. So, for a young girl to get pregnant and be told it's okay to have an abortion, that leaves a hole, guys.
Yeah.
I was engaged for 6 years when I was not a Christian and I was fallen away from the Lord. And my fiance and myself, we were a very violent and volatile couple. We were into all sorts of crazy things. And she fell pregnant with my child, and I'm an adopted child, passed away. I don't know my real parents. I've never met them. I was given away by my mother in 1978 because she was 15, turning 16, fell pregnant by a 25-year-old guy. And her family and his family didn't want her to have me. She had to run away to a farm in the Eastern Cape in Queenstown, have me quietly, and then I was taken from her and put into an East London hospital, 6 weeks premature, tubes sticking out of me. And my Christian mother, who was looking for a child to adopt, got taken there by social services and said, here's a few babies, choose one of them. And she went to the crib that had this little guy that could fit into a size 3 shoebox where you could still see his organs inside of him with all these tubes sticking out. And she said, that's the one that God's going to give me. That is my chosen son from God to me. And she adopted me. And I thank God for that.
Yeah.
But if abortion was legal, would I be sitting on this couch with you right now? And you guys, would you be listening to me right now? I would not exist.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 2003 when I was engaged. Now, that means my child now would have been 20. Whether it was a boy or a girl, my fiancée had an abortion. Her mother took her to the Mary Stopes Clinic in Pinetown and paid for the abortion because I was such a bad person doing so many bad things with syndicated crime that they didn't want another one of me running around in the world.
Oh.
Because I was such a bad person. So my child got its life snuffed out because of me being a bad person, because abortion was legal. It was the easy thing for them to go and do. Oh, we don't want this person because they might turn out like their father. Punishing my child for sins that I'd committed. You don't, if someone rapes a lady and he's got a son, you don't go to that son and put him in jail for the father raping that lady.
Sure.
But yet my child was punished inside the womb, which is supposed to be the safest place. So 260,000 illegal abortions, that's, according to the government statistics, 58% of all abortions in South Africa are still done illegally, even though it's legal. Now, we're not worrying about the babies that are being terminated. We're just talking about the mothers here who are still going to backstreet abortion clinics and still choose to go and do it illegally. But yet they promised us in 1997 the reason why we want to make it legal is because we want to stop illegal abortion. But yet the government in 2018 had this massive conference in the Eastern Cape to discuss where the education had failed and how we can re-educate. And now we talk about, you were talking a little bit about it, the kind of education we get in our schools now. It's absolutely, absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Now, why am I saying this? Remember, guys, we said earlier that according to Wikipedia that South Africa is 80% Christian. Does any of those values sound Christian, passed away to you?
No, absolutely not.
I don't think so. It's far from it. So
absolutely not.
80% of South Africans identify as Christians, to use a modern vernacular. But yet, we have 48.87 murders per 100,000 people. Now, that is the second highest in the world after Jamaica. Now, I know the government puts these stats like this, guys, for a reason, because 48.87 murders per 100,000 doesn't sound like a lot. But if you take that up to 60 million people living in the country and you do the mathematics, and you guys can do the maths for yourself, and maybe in the comments, put the correct figures there of how many people are actually being killed every single year. 41 per 100,000. We've got, according to Business Tech in South Africa, we are ranked 187th out of 192 countries in terms of safety, making us the sixth most dangerous country in the world. That is absolute madness. According to the World Population Review, South Africa has a rape rate And again, they do these figures like this because when you listen to this figure, you go, but that's not a lot. 70.22 incidents per 100,000 people in 2023, which is the 6th highest in the world. If you actually go and do the math, guys, you find out that it's about 500 or 600 rapes happening every single day. How many is that even per hour? Go work it out for yourselves and be shocked like I was when I worked it out. I'm not giving you the answers on purpose because you guys can think for yourselves. Go and do the math. Do the calculation. 70.22 per 100,000 people. Work out on an hourly and a daily average how many people are being raped in South Africa every single day. According to the Mail and Guardian, the number of people trapped in human trafficking more than doubled in 2021-22 in that financial year. And I just saw on the news, someone sent me a screenshot the other day of towards the end of last year, September, October, November, December, over a 3 to 4 month period, we had 4,700 kidnappings in 4 months. And there were only, I think, 136 ransom notes out of those 4,000. I'm pretty sure that's got to do with human trafficking.
Yeah.
South Africa is ranked 7th highest on the index that measures criminality in 193 countries, including human trafficking, the arms trade, the drug trade, cybercrime, and financial crimes. We all know about the financial crimes. We are about, I think it's 5 trillion rand in debt at the moment as a country. So, guys, those are just some of the crazy statistics, and I can go on and on and on about this. But I just wanted you guys to hear that first before we discuss a little bit about the ACDP manifesto and what Pastor Wayne has to say about, you heard him say that it was the biggest ACDP manifesto launch that they've ever had. But for those that don't know what an ACDP manifesto is and what the ACDP manifesto consists of, I'm pretty sure Pastor Wayne doesn't need the manifesto in front of him, but I'm just looking at it now. And it's not long or convoluted. It's 13 pages. I was shocked. I was like, why is it so short? What's going on here? But if you listen to what they talk about, job creation and poverty alleviation, keeping the lights on and our trains and ships moving, Eskom, Ishkom, obviously we like to talk about that, Transnet and Prasa, I mean, do they even exist anymore? I'm not too sure. Our railway lines are now just covered with people living on them. Trains don't come on them anymore. I mean, I remember as a boy, you had to put your ear down and listen for a train because they were coming thick and fast all the time. You could get knocked. Crime and justice, property rights, rural development, food security, access to housing, access to clean water and sanitation. These things shouldn't even be part of a manifesto because we should be having these things already without having to talk about it. This is just basic human rights we're talking about here. Health and well-being. Obviously, we touch on Israel in the manifesto. Protecting and promoting your freedoms, family values and moral regeneration. In a country that's supposed to be born free since 1994, we still have to discuss these things in a manifesto, Pastor Wayne. Maybe you can touch on the ACDP manifesto briefly for us.
Sure. Well, maybe let me just backtrack a bit, Vaughan. You've given some very, telling statistics and some scary statistics of where South Africa is. And rather than making progress over the last 30 years, what certainly has happened is retrogressed. Where we were promised a new dawn by the current President Ramaphosa, what South Africans are currently seeing is not a new dawn, but rather a nightmarish reality of all of the different indices where there's retrogression and going backwards rather than making progress. And so it's against this particular backdrop where we want to very certainly indicate to South Africans the importance of understanding the mandate that God has given to us as the ACDP, and I think Christians at large. We need to understand what this mandate is. And in the book of Genesis chapter 1, the Lord gives this particular mandate where he says, now rule, subdue, and have dominion.
Yes.
When God created man, he blessed them, and he says, now go and rule, subdue, and have dominion. Now, the question that we have to ask, who is ruling? When you are ruling, God gave his children the mandate to take dominion over the earth. Not dominion, not to subjugate man, over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and so on. So we are not there to subjugate man and keep man oppressed.
I'm glad you're saying this because I have to explain this to people. But they get it wrong.
But there's this mandate that we have. So we have to ask ourselves the question, who is ruling?
Yes.
Who is making the regulations? When Jesus asked the disciples, said, Lord, teach us how to pray. And the disciple says, Jesus taught them, he says, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Who are the ones who have the responsibility the mandate to bring the kingdom of God, the principles, the values of the kingdom of God in heaven to earth. In heaven as it is on earth as it is in heaven. We have this responsibility as believers. Now, we take, as the ACDP, we take that mandate very seriously. I said that there's a groaning that we can hear from the people in South Africa. And so in our manifesto, we are saying that we've heard the SOS. We've heard an SOS is a distress call.
And what does SOS stand for?
Save our souls.
And that's not a Christian thing. That comes from a secular.
Well, absolutely.
But
it's either save our souls, this SOS, or save our ship. Yes. The ship is sinking. Yes. As a nation, the people in South Africa have this sinking feeling. You know, within the complex that we live, the people there are saying, well, it seems as if this is it for us. This is it for South Africa.
Yeah, it's an apocalypse.
You know, they have this feeling that things are just going wrong, and that's currently what's happening in eThekwini.
Yeah.
And so as the ACDP, we're saying, we've heard the SOS. We've heard the cry. We've heard the groaning. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. When the ungodly are in authority, the people groan. And we're saying we heard the groaning. We've heard the groaning because there is the first S, there's no service delivery. Service delivery on every level. You know, sadly, over 50%, the Auditor General has indicated, over 50% of our 257 or so municipalities that we have in South Africa are no longer going concerns, virtually bankrupt.
Yes.
eThekwini was the most cash flush, was the richest municipality in 2000 when I was there. It was the only municipality that was operating in the black. In other words, they had enough financial reserves put away in order to make sure that the city was a going concern. You fast track to where we are now, all right? And it is now a municipality that is operating in the black, has borrowed, and one of the councillors, former councillors who is now with me in Parliament, came to me and he says, "Hey, Honourable Thring, where we were in eThekwini, things are bad. I've heard that they only have a few months cash reserves in hand in order to keep the municipality going." So the Auditor General himself has indicated we have a problem in South Africa. And one of the things that he said, the former Auditor General Kimi Makwetu is indicated, the problem that we have in the municipalities is that we've got officials who have their hands in the cookie jar.
Yes.
Or rather, he said, the wrong hands at the till were the words that he used.
Yes.
And so this is a problem. It's a problem also of cadre deployment, wrong hands at the till, people who are not properly qualified, people who are, according to the Jethro principle, not able, not competent, not trustworthy, people who do not hate dishonest gain, and people who do not fear God. We have those kinds of individuals who are now managing billions of rands of taxpayers' money, ratepayers' money, and it's what they call now their turn to eat. Yeah. And so there's no care for the aged, no care for the ordinary citizen, no care for the poor, no care for the little child, no care for those who are indigent and in poverty. It is their turn to eat. Now we've got to turn this around. So we've heard the SOS. There is no service delivery. Service delivery is actually plummeted. We've got more service delivery protests in South Africa than what we had pre-1994.
Yeah.
Post-1994, there are more service delivery protests across the country because the South Africans are now absolutely fed up. No service delivery. Infrastructure is at its worst. Infrastructure development is what is supposed to be. I sit on public works and infrastructure. But there's certainly no infrastructure that is taking place. I was interviewed recently about Telkom Towers. Over 600...
That is insane. I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
600 million rand was spent on buildings that were supposed to be used for the South African police services, but those buildings have stood empty for over 6 years.
Clearly says he's working at home for the last 4 years
from his house. And there's an office that was there.
Yeah.
So we visited about 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, maybe a year ago, we visited Telkom Towers, and it astounded us. So after like 5 years or so, from 2016 when the buildings were first purchased, They only occupy those offices in around about 2021, 22. SAPS moved in. Now, we had different managing agencies, and they brought in a managing agent there. The South African, the Development Bank of South Africa was brought in as a management agent. But they too, they are being paid taxpayers' money to manage the buildings, to make sure the buildings are brought up to scratch. But in terms of infrastructure development, it is lacking.
No, where is that caring for the people?
Well,
you're sending workers to a building that can collapse at any given time, and you turn a blind eye to it.
So, Vaughan, when we were there, SAPS had occupied, South African Police Services had occupied one of the 5 to 6 buildings, right? Only one of the 5 to 6 buildings. They occupied it. But while they were there, in occupation of the building, they said, well, the air cons are not working. We asked, why are the air cons? Well, somebody came in and stole the cables. While the South African Police Services were occupying the building, somebody came, cut the cable, and the cables, where was it? On the top floor. All right, this is about 19, 20 or so stories. Somebody got from the ground floor to the top floor, cut the cables, and then went out of the building unnoticed. Now,
these are stories, very far-fetched stories. How is this even possible?
Well, this is currently what we have to deal with. Now, within public works and infrastructure, we've been also asking for, do we have an asset register? Do we have an up-to-date asset register? Public works and infrastructure has the largest property portfolio in the country.
Yeah.
Ought to be one of the wealthiest if it was properly run. Now, if you go to the JSE, there are some property companies. They are profitable with a fraction of the size of the properties that public works and infrastructure has, and yet we have a challenge of buildings not being properly maintained, air conditioners that are not working, lifts that are not working, windows that are unable to open or close, and a host of other challenges that we have to deal with. And so it is an indication of a government that is not properly able to manage and to service what ought to be there. So, service delivery. Secondly is order. So the first S is service. Second S is order. You've quoted some of the crime statistics that we're currently facing. South Africa has some of the highest crime statistics in the world. Sadly, with regards to rape and murder, only 10%, the conviction rate for rape and murder in South Africa is just 10%.
Yeah.
So in other words, 90% of those who commit murder and rape get away with their crimes. 90%. We are never going to be able to deal with murder and rape and other serious crimes if the conviction rate is so low.
Yeah.
If a criminal feels that I have a 90% chance of getting away with murder, a 90% chance of getting away with rape, a 90% chance of getting away with human trafficking, a 90% chance of getting away with kidnapping and so on, we are not going to be able to deal with the problems of crime in South Africa where we have this low conviction rate. Under the Scorpions, during the era of Thabo Mbeki, under the Scorpions had a 90% conviction rate. So 90% of the cases that were brought to court by the Scorpions, 90% of the cases, 9 out of every 10 were sent to jail of their cases. Then we had Jacob Zuma come into office as the president. He took the Scorpions and he placed the Scorpions under the South African Police Service, who has a 10% conviction rate. Right now, I call them the Hawks. Right now, the Hawks are bound.
Yeah.
The Hawks are not able to effectively convict, and the NPA are not able to effectively convict criminals because of the system in which the Hawks now have to operate under the South African. They are answerable to the Police Commission and to Becky Cele and so on.
These specialized NARC units, these specialized units from the late 80s and the 90s, right up until 2000, that were dealing specifically with gangs and all the tools at their disposals, all no longer really exist.
Sure.
You've got more gangsters in Mitchell's Plain than you've got the entire police force in South Africa.
it's a travesty of justice. And when you look then, so the second aspect of within our manifesto, order, we have to look at bringing order back to South Africa.
Yeah.
And then the third S is actually safety. And again, how many South Africans actually feel safe within their homes? So the crime stats indicates that one of the other statistics is and very sadly, in South Africa they say now 1 out of every 5 women can expect, or 1 out of every 4, 25% of South African women can expect to be raped or sexually assaulted in their lifetime. And these are statistics that are, people don't feel safe within South Africa anymore. And as the ACDP, we are saying, we've heard the SOS. We've heard the SOS of a lack of service. The SOS where order is not in place. We've heard the cry that safety, people don't feel safe even in their homes or in their streets. When we were growing up, we were able to play in the streets. No longer. Parents now have to call their children in before it gets dark, and even before it gets dark in South Africa, because the streets are no longer safe. Our folk where I pastored the church used to be able to walk to church, walk to the services, our evening services, midweek services. Now the ladies say, Pastor, we can't do it. We don't feel safe in the streets. We now have to pay for a taxi or transport to bring our children, our folk to church, because they no longer feel safe in the streets. And this is a microcosm of what is taking place across South Africa. And as the ACDP, we're saying, we've heard the cry. And so to touch on a few aspects of the manifesto, one of them, firstly, obviously, is crime. We are saying we need to introduce an independent crime fighting unit, much like the Scorpions. And there's no other political party who's saying what the ACDP is doing.
Well, so the guys want to get away with corruption. They don't want to get caught.
Much like your Chapter 9 institutions that are independent of the president, independent of parliament. They operate because their function is to bring crime under control. So the ACDP is saying an independent crime fighting unit. We are also saying that we need to properly resource SAPS, we need to properly resource the SIU, we need to properly resource the NPA and all of your crime fighting units, the Hawks. We need to properly make sure that they are properly resourced. The ACDP is also one of the few political parties that speaks out about a zero tolerance policy with regards to crime, where if you are arrested for murder or arrested for rape, no bail. No bail for those particular, and
that just stands to
reason. If you're convicted, you serve your sentence. If you're given a 30-year, 40-year, no parole. All right, we don't want you coming out into the street and murdering again. We don't want you coming out into the street applying for bail, and while you are out in the street, you are raping again. And how many women and children and little children have been murdered, or have been a woman and the girl child has been raped, for those who have been out on parole, or those who have been given bail, where they should be behind bars. And so our crime fighting institutions are failing ordinary South African citizens. And then we are saying that those who are convicted, you earn your keep. You know, some of the prisoners and those who have been convicted, they have 3 hot meals, they have a warm bed and 3 warm meals, and given opportunities to study and so on. While 25% of South Africans in South Africa, 25% of South Africans go to bed hungry.
Yeah.
25, the poverty index is going through the roof. Yeah. So those who are convicted, you earn your keep. Yeah. You need to earn your keep and pay back to society the damage that you actually did. So where is the recompense? The recompense that is given to the victim. And so the ACDP, by the way, Vaughan, is also one of the political parties that has forefronted the aspect of restorative justice.
Yes.
And the principle of restorative justice is, you have some young people, you mentioned, your wayward days before you came to Christ. And you have some young people, because of their background, they go a little bit astray, but there is the chance of them being rehabilitated.
Yes.
And so particularly for the young offenders, the ACDP says we need to look at restorative justice.
Yeah.
So we don't want to send those young offenders to jail where when they go there, they get raped, they get abused, and then they become criminals in jail.
Yes.
So the principle of restorative justice, where if they are convicted, you go and you pay society back. And you learn the art of being restored back to society and what it is to become a decent member of society again. And so the principle of restorative justice is a principle that was initiated by the ACDP, and by the way, the ruling party has taken on that particular principle, and they're applying it now within the different areas of the courts and so on, the principle of restorative justice. So these are some of the ways in terms of restoring order, bringing safety back to our communities, is what the ACDP is saying. Then in terms of service and service delivery, if you look at our economic policies and poverty alleviation policies, number one, it has to be government has the responsibility to create an environment that is conducive for business.
Yes.
If business thrives, businesses lift up, and the private sector, everybody, when the tide rises, the ships also rise with the tide.
Correct.
So what we want to do is raise that tide, because as we raise the tide, then all of those that are in poverty, they automatically come up with the tide. As the economy grows, those that are in poverty come out of poverty because now they have jobs. Jobs gives you a sense of dignity.
Yeah.
It gives you a sense of self-worth. I am able to earn my keep. I am not dependent on government. I'm not dependent on my mum. I'm not dependent on my 70-year-old dad's pension. I have dignity. Yeah. I am able to earn my keep. And so what we want to do is create, as the ACDP, firstly create that environment for business to conduct their business and to do their business in South Africa. In order to do that, in order to create this environment, there has to be political stability, number one. And look at the track record of the ACDP. 30 years, blameless, no slurs, no scandals on the ACDP, rather, over the last 30 years. The ACDP has a clean track record. That's what we want to bring into government, where there's political stability. Then secondly, you also need policy stability and policy security. Government currently is creating policy instability. It's creating policy instability with some of the policies that it has, particularly with regards to affirmative action, and particularly with regards to broad-based black economic empowerment. You have businesses coming and they are told, if you want to come and do business, then 30% or 20% of your business must be this color, irrespective of their skills.
Yes, not about qualifications.
Irrespective of their ability to perform. Now, there's no business that will come to South Africa and will say, well, no business that is worth their salt, that will want to come and invest in South Africa and have these quotas forced upon them. Yeah. All right. So you have a challenge with regards to policy and the wrong kinds of policies. By the way, one of my qualifications is I have a degree in psychology, a psych honors degree. And while doing
you didn't
studies,
get this degree from a lucky packet.
No, UNISA.
Or put it up, draw it up in Photoshop or something.
No,
just checking.
I have two of my degrees from UNISA, and then one from the University of London, the third.
Qualified, guys. Qualified.
So during my studies, there was a study done on affirmative action in the United States, a psychological study, and they found that in the United States, those who were put into positions because of the government's affirmative action policies, it affected them psychologically.
Yes.
It affected them mentally.
Am I there because I'm worth something, or am I there just because I'm part of a number system that needs to make up a quota?
And absolutely. So you have people going to those positions, but then their colleagues are saying, you here, but you just here You're just a number.
Yeah.
All right. You're here to fill a particular number. You are not here to carry your weight. You don't have the necessary skill. You don't have the necessary qualification. You don't have the necessary ability. And so now we are going to have to carry you as a result. And so they found that it affected the individuals that were given those particular positions negatively, psychologically and emotionally. Even in the case where the individual did have the ability.
Correct.
Even where they did have the competency, all right, their colleagues still had this impression.
Yes.
Well, you're just here because you have to fill a particular number, and so psychologically it affected them. I argued this particular point. I also sit on not only public works, but I also sit on trade and industry. And I said within our portfolio committee, I said to the Minister of Trade and Industry, this we are doing our black folk in particular a disservice. I said, growing up in South Africa, I'm considered to be black South African. I know what it is to suffer under apartheid and the segregation and to have an education system that is inferior. But I have proven that I'm able to hold my own. I'm able to hold my own academically.
Yeah.
I'm able to hold my own intellectually. If you are able to work hard, I've worked hard. We have those kinds of individuals in the ACDP from all walks of life, irrespective of their color, all different colors in the ACDP who are able to hold their own and who do not need a quota system to protect them. And so this is the point that I argued within trade and industry. Black people are not dumb. Black people are intelligent. All they need is the opportunity. Now, what is the opportunity that we as the ACDP are saying? We need an opportunity. Attached to our economic policy is also the education policy. Because where you have an education policy that meets the needs of business, the skills, the challenge that we have is that we have in South Africa children that are leaving school but don't have a skill. Children that are, and then students that are going to university, graduates, but the graduates as they come out from university and the TVET colleges and so on are not meeting the needs of business. They are not meeting the skills that business needs. So there's a mismatch between our education system, our higher education system, and even our secondary and high school education system. There's a complete mismatch. One of the reasons why the ACDP says we need to be teaching even coding at a primary school level. Because right now, in terms of IT and WebTech and the so-called fourth industrial revolution, this is where the world is gravitating to. How are we as South Africans competing with the rest of the world in terms of this? You know, we went to South Korea not so long ago, and we looked at South Korea just a few, in the 1960s, 1970s. South Korea was a third world country, in fact, behind South Africa. Right? Considered to be behind. It was a completely agrarian economy. But look at where South Korea is now. One of the things that they focused on was a matching of the skills with the needs of business. Today, South Korea is one of the fastest growing economies, I think the 10th or so fastest growing economy in the world. They do not have the resources that South Africa has. They do not have any of the minerals that South Africa. They import their raw materials, and they have, for example, one of the fastest, biggest shipbuilding industries in the world with no raw materials.
Samsung,
Hyundai, Kia, and so on. Right, coming from a so-called agrarian economy. Because you had individuals who had the wherewithal to progressively think and have not only just a 5-year plan, but a 10, 20, 30-year plan in terms of how they're going to be able to grow the economy. This is what the ACDP, these are the plans of the ACDP. So growing the economy is key. Having political stability, having policy stability, ensuring that we focus on small businesses. Small businesses contribute some 60 to 70%. 60 to 70% of you look at first world countries. 60 to 70% of the economy, the production, is created by small business. It's not your multinationals. It's the small business sector. Sadly, we've worked against the small business sector in South Africa. We've got small businesses that are closing down because of the red tape. We've got small businesses that are closing down because of policies and administration hurdles, all of these administrative hoops that they want to jump to before they can even establish their businesses. And as the ACDP was saying, we will promote, we will give incentives to small businesses to start. We will remove that administrative red tape so that it will not be difficult. The ACDP travels to Rwanda. In Rwanda, they have a one-stop shop. Within 24 hours, you are able to register and start a business in Rwanda. This is what we want to see. Rwanda, in terms of investment, is overtaking South Africa in terms of business investment, because government has created an environment that is conducive for business to operate. That's all business asks.
And this is after the Rwandan genocide, where two ethnic groups of people murdered and killed each other,
the Hutus and the Tutsis. That's correct.
And you look at them.
1/3 of their population, 1/3, 33% of their population was wiped out.
Yeah.
And this was also around about in the 1990s, just when we were coming into our democracy. But you look at a government that had vision, a government that had foresight, and you look at what they've done. And yes, there are challenges. Not to say that there aren't any challenges with the current president, and some obviously are saying that he is anti-democracy and creating instability. But if you look at what he has done within their country, the Rwandan economy is booming. The ACDP says it is possible to do it in South Africa. One of the ways, Vaughan, also within trade and industry, I sit within the Trade and Industry Committee. I'm known as the champion of beneficiation. And I decry the fact that in South Africa, South Africa is the largest exporter of raw materials on the continent. The largest exporter of raw materials on the continent. We have some 80 to 90% of the world's reserves of platinum. Yes. South Africa has 80 to 90% of the world reserves. But where's the platinum going? It's being exported.
Correct.
Where's our gold going? Exported. Where's our steel? The vast majority exported. The vast majority of our diamonds exported. Even coal. Even our coal. Yeah. We are told by the first world countries that used coal to grow their economies. Some 4%, the African continent, 4% of our carbon footprint, 4% of the carbon emissions comes from the African continent. 4% from the African continent.
Correct.
Yet the South African government receives money. Well, actually loans, have received loans that we as the taxpayer have to pay back to shut down our coal-fired power stations.
Because we need to go green.
We have, and I just forget, but one of the most productive coal-fired power stations that was functioning effectively, all right, was shut down because we received this money from the European, from the United States to shut down our coal-fired power stations so that we can actually go. Yet, on the continent of Africa, we emit in terms of carbon 4%.
Yeah.
4%. So South Africa's emission would be probably, in terms of our global footprint, will be 0. Whatever percent.
Yes.
And yet we are shutting down our coal-fired power stations to suit the economies that currently, however, are still using coal. The United States is still using coal.
Correct.
Europe is still using coal. China is still using coal. India is still using coal. China built 100 in 2023, 100 coal power stations, the largest number of coal, and they are one of the fastest growing, if they haven't overtaken America as yet, but they're the second largest economy in the world, and yet they are still using coal. China says we are not ready to move away from coal, and yet in South Africa we want to shut down our coal-fired. We have coal-fired power stations. We have a 200-year reserve, coal reserve, 200 years of coal in South Africa. We've exported our coal exports to Europe increased by some 500 to 7% last year, 2023. Our exports of coal to Europe, who's telling us to shut down our coal-fired power stations. But our exports to coal to Europe have increased by 500 to 7%. It is hypocritical.
Yeah.
We had a meeting with members of the European Parliament who came to South Africa, and they said, because of global warming, South Africa needs to move away from coal. You got to shut down. You got to go green. The ACDP's position is, we understand our need to be custodians of the environment. And so we talk about clean coal technology. So where you're not emitting carbon and poisonous, and the technology exists.
Yes, you can catch all of that.
You catch that and you repurpose it and so on. So the technology exists where we are able to use clean coal technology. But I call out our European counterparts. When they came to visit us in Parliament, I called them out and I says, you are being hypocritical. You are asking for us to shut down our coal-fired power stations, yet our South African exports of coal to Europe has increased by some 500 to 700%. And you know what the leader of the delegation says? Well, it's because we have a war in Europe. There's the Russian-Ukraine war, and it's affecting us. Well, for goodness sake, we have a war in South Africa. We have a war of poverty. We have a war where we are not able to, our economy is dying. We are losing some 100 billion rand a day because we are not able to keep the lights on. Businesses are shutting down. And so how dare they say to us that you shut down your coal. Don't use coal, but export it to us. Yeah. Look at those kilometers upon kilometers of coal trucks that are going to the Richards Bay coal terminal. Coal going out of the country when we need it here in South Africa.
It's more coal going to Richards Bay than you see the coal trucks going through to Eskom.
Well, absolutely. So there's this hypocrisy that we have as the ACDP call out. So, but very clearly we are saying, clean coal technology. There needs to be a basket of on the table in terms of energy product, and yes, we can use solar, and yes, we can use wind, and yes, we can use the wave technology that is there to generate energy using the ocean currents, and we need to use all of these clean coal technologies. By the way, that also includes nuclear. Germany tried to shut down their nuclear power stations, but now they're going back. They're having to repurpose their nuclear and their coal. Australia tried, they shut down their coal-fired power stations, but now they're going back.
Yes.
Because you need the base load that is able to offer you a secure and a reliable source of energy. And so South Africa has not reached that stage where we are able to move away from coal. But very clearly, we need to be good custodians of the economy. Now, so that's on the energy sector. And so we are saying that even in terms of, in our manifesto, even in terms of turning Eskom around, well, firstly, you need capable, there again, you need not cadres who are deployed, not cadres who are sitting there and having their Kentucky.
I think none of us would mind if cadres are deployed if they were qualified.
Well, I think precisely. Praveen Gordon said that we are now, in terms of Eskom, we are looking for those skills, those who were forced to leave Eskom because they were the wrong color.
80-year-old engineers.
So
I'm just taking it to the extreme because these guys are retired. They're sitting at home and they're saying we need you back now.
Well, absolutely. And so it takes you this number of years. Eskom in the early 2000s won awards for being the best run, most efficient energy utility in the world, and the most inexpensive in the world. And it took the ruling party just 10 years to destroy it. All right, 10 years to destroy it. If you look at where Eskom currently is and the cost of electricity has increased by some 600%. Yeah. Inflation has increased over the last decade or so. Inflation has increased, they say, there's an inflation increase of about, some 100% increase. So the rate of increase of the cost of electricity has outpaced inflation.
Yeah.
We are going to reach a critical stage where electricity is going to become unaffordable in South Africa. And so something has to be done. And again, as the ACDP were saying, we need capable folk who understand how those power stations work, who know how to produce reliable energy. We need the technicians, we need the electrical engineers, we need those who are properly skilled. And so it is our president, Reverend Dr. Kenneth Meshwe, says South Africans don't care what color service delivery comes in.
I don't care.
What they need is service delivery.
Yes.
If you are saying, no, I don't want you to come and service, I have a problem of electricity, and the electrician comes in and the electrician is not the proper color, you're not going to chase him away. Are you able to do the job? Yes, please do it.
Correct.
So we need the competence, we need the skill. We are also saying that yes, we will look at partnering as well with the private sector. The private sector actually have the skills. And government, by the way, is now turning to the private sector. Government is currently saying, we need your help.
Yeah.
So as the ACDP...
The SOEs speak for themselves. You don't even have to say anything. Just go look at the SOEs and tell me if you don't need the private sector.
It's a crying shame there is not an SOE. You can talk about Eskom, you can talk about PRASA, you can talk about Transnet, you go to SAA, South African Airways, who, by the way, is now needing another bailout. They've been given billions of rands in order to assist them.
Hey, these guys have got big couches, passed away, and that's all I have to say. Big couches to hide all that money.
Well, the minister actually said, well, these discussions now with the current situation that SA is finding itself, shut the door. It's a closed discussion. The public has a right to know where is SAA currently. What is the financial situation? Who are the partners that are coming to assist? What are the deals?
Yeah.
The public have a right to know. You cannot have a closed door to these kinds of negotiations.
Unless you're trying to hide something.
Unless there's something to hide. But very, very clearly, I think that when it comes to our state-owned enterprises, there is not a state-owned enterprise that we can speak of that is being properly run in South Africa.
No.
And that has to be turned around. And so the ACDP speaks about, the competence, speaks about the skill, speaks about the Jethro principle, the biblical values. By the way, the ACDP is not ashamed of our worldview. Often I'm asked, why doesn't the ACDP remove Christian from its name? Call yourself the African Democratic Party. Because some say, that the word Christian is offensive. My response to that, Vaughan, is, well, you have the South African Communist Party. Do you ask them to remove the C out from communism because it's offensive?
Correct.
80 to 90% of South Africans are confessional Christians and confess to be Christians. And so, these minority communists, do you ask them to remove the C out because it's offensive?
And have we ever complained about it?
No, we don't. So why is it that as a Christian Democratic Party we are asked to remove the C out from because it's offensive, to a certain minority sector of South Africa? So we are unapologetically Christian. The worldview that that the ACDP holds to is a biblical worldview. We are guided by a biblical worldview. We hold fast to a biblical worldview, and that particular worldview guides our policies, guides our economic policy, guides our education policy, guides our energy policy, guides our health policy. Every particular policy that the ACDP has is guided by our biblical worldview. We are not ashamed of it. We will not apologize for it, and we will not withdraw it.
Correct. Now, Pastor Wayne has done the perfect segue to the very final part of this discussion we are going to be having with Pastor Wayne and the ACDP as Deputy President of the ACDP, as a father, as a pastor, as an educator, and as a very well-educated individual, as I'm finding out while I'm busy talking to him. So stay tuned for the very short last segment, guys, where we just discuss a little bit. And Pastor Wayne touched on this when we're talking about how the world is changing. And I want to give you guys some shocking, but not crazy statistics like our crime statistics, but shocking statistics that people don't understand about South Africa regarding our digital space, our screen time, our social media, how many people are plugged in, and how we should be looking at this as part of the skill set that we are now putting into our education systems in order to teach our kids how to use these platforms and use the new avenues of revenue that they can get from these platforms and be qualified to do what I do as a digital marketer, as a web developer, as an app developer, who, by the way, started studying at the ripe old age of 36, part-time, 2 master's degrees. I don't know if I'll ever finish them, but Lord willing, I'll still be alive when I do, because when I say part-time, I study little bit, module here, module there, do a final exam. But what I've learned in the last 10 years from the age of 36 to 46 in this field proves that it is so much easier for a young person to do it. But if me as an old person can do it, hey, who else? So guys, stay tuned. We are coming back now for the final segment of today's podcast. All right, guys, so we are coming towards the end of this session with Pastor Wayne. Oh, no, boo, I know it's terrible. It's been such a short amount of time, and you guys have been so interested the whole way through. Just make sure that you are following all the right channels, you are listening to all the right people, and not just following people for the sake of following them, because as Christians, I think we just follow people online, and we must realize that with the people that we are following, we are agreeing to what they agree with. So align yourself with people that have biblical principles, that understand who you are as a Christian. Don't just sit on the fence. And this is what I'm going to bring to your attention, and hopefully Pastor Wayne is going to give us some closing remarks and comments and speak from his heart to the young people of South Africa that might tune in and listen to this. But I just want to give you guys a brief breakdown. Now, this is Social Media Stats South Africa, Pastor Wayne. This is not, we're not going worldwide here yet, but 30 million active social media users in this country. I think our population is 60 million.
That's right.
Half of our country is active on social media. Now, this obviously presents opportunities for businesses and for education, especially with education, because we need to be teaching people and training people how to use these digital spaces properly, engaging with communities, with consumers, brand development, app development, web development, digital marketing, which I'm involved with. Let's look at some stats. Let's go WhatsApp. Everyone's on WhatsApp now. It doesn't matter how old or young you are on WhatsApp. And WhatsApp has developed into a crazy platform. But South Africa has got around 10 million WhatsApp users that are currently active on WhatsApp. That means 17% of the South African population is using WhatsApp at the moment. How many teenagers use social media? We think of rural areas, not having access to smartphones. I mean, we've got signal pretty much everywhere now. But who can afford a smartphone in a rural area? And this is the mindset that we've got. We think, oh no, young people are not really that plugged in. Only the guys in the city or the middle class guys or whatever. Teenagers aged 13 to 17 years make up 10% of all social media users in South Africa. 5.6% of them are male, 5.6 female, 4.8% male. So we've actually got more female users than male users in the 13 to 17-year-old age bracket. How much time do South Africans spend on social media? A lot of people just go to be born a lot. And that is true. We rank 4th in the world in terms of time spent online per day. Now, this is not screen time. I'm going to get to screen time later, which is another shocking statistic. But online, on social platforms, we are 4th in the world when it comes to social media figures. The average South African spends over 52,000 minutes on social media every year. If you work that out, it's about 36 days and 18 hours out of the year that we are full-time online, over a month. Wow. How many South Africans are online? Now, not just social media, but we're talking about internet access. Yeah, we're a still a developing nation. We are full of corruption. It can't be that much. What, 20%, 30%, 40%? 41.19 million. Wow. That's more than almost 2/3 of the population have access to the internet. Yet we are not supposed to be one of those countries that's so technologically advanced, but yet we actually are. It's just the corruption that gives us a bad name. Yeah. Instagram. 6.8 million South Africans, about 11% of the population are on Instagram. And if we go to Facebook, which now, this is the scary thing. People say, oh, Facebook is a fading market. It's not. Guys, Facebook is head and shoulders above everyone else. 82% of the total market share in South Africa belongs to Facebook. Wow. The rest is all shared against all the other platforms. What age group uses Instagram in South Africa? And I do this because this is for me, this is marketing.
Yeah.
If I want to reach certain target groups, I need to know where to reach them now as Christians, as organizations, as political parties that uphold biblical principles. What platforms, let's just be on YouTube, let's just be on Facebook. You can't. You're shooting yourself in the foot.
Sure.
If you want to reach 18 to 24-year-olds, they make up about 30% of the entire country's Instagrammers. 25 to 34-year-olds, also roughly 30% are on Instagram. So 60% of your people under the age of 35 are reachable more on Instagram than Facebook or anywhere else. Wow. How many South Africans are on Twitter now? X, no longer Twitter, thanks to Elon rebranding. And I'm getting back onto Twitter now, or X, because it's now a free speech platform. You don't get shot down for saying, you can even have hate speech on there. He leaves it up. You can say whatever you want, and you know that you're not going to get shouted at or blocked or taken down. But 2.85 million South Africans are on Twitter. 5% of the population, but the conversations that go on there are absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, for the business people out there that are on LinkedIn, if you think LinkedIn isn't that big, we've got around 10 million people on South Africa. And now for B2B, business to business marketing, 10 million South Africans are on there. They are all highly qualified professional people that are on LinkedIn. So you've got a resource tool there to go and find the most skilled people. 10 million of them are on there. So key takeaways for this, guys, and I'll end with this. While the use of Facebook is falling, it is because of all the other platforms that are growing. We can see this with our political sphere. The ANC wants more and more parties being registered that are small because it's splitting up the votes more and more. And they still stay the main party, even though their percentages are dropping quite drastically. I think if they'll be lucky to get 32% this year, it'll be a lot.
It's now under 40%.
Under 40%, which is awesome, guys. It means that people are starting to wake up. But Facebook is falling, especially younger audiences, but it's still most far dominant above all else. Brands that are keen to engage young audiences should look to establish a presence. And this is where I get shot down by Christians. They say, hey, but Vaughan, TikTok is like one of those crazy platforms. It is crazy, guys, but because it's so crazy, we need more people on there telling the truth and spreading the good news.
Absolutely.
So young guys, get onto TikTok. Please, get onto Instagram. And for B2B guys, like I said, Twitter and LinkedIn for business to business is by far the best. And before we get past Wayne's final comments, this blew me away. Average screen time, this is average screen time statistics as of 2024. And I'm not going to go through the American key stats. I'll leave that for another podcast. But I just want to touch on this one fact. What do you think the average screen time worldwide is, Pastor Wayne, if you had to average it out? And you probably know this already, or can have a rough guess.
The average screen time per day?
Yeah, worldwide, on average.
I would estimate between 2-4 hours or so.
Right, so when we talk screens now, and guys that are into digital marketing like myself, we're talking about screen time on cell phone, on laptop, on TV, and everything like that. The average screen time worldwide is around 6 hours and 46 minutes that we spend on our screens. Now, you can break that down to countries. And where do you think South Africa sits? If you had to say how much screen time South Africans sit at, are we above the world average, or do you think we're below the world average of 6 hours?
Possibly above.
How much above do you think we are?
Well, let me hazard a guess. Let's say if it's average of 6, I would say 8 to 10%.
Right. This is how crazy South Africans are with screen time. And this is why it's so important for Christians to be online, because this is the new evangelism. This is the new door-to-door. Go into all nations. The Great Commission. Matthew 28, 18 to 20 says we need to go into all nations. All nations, you break down that into its root form. It's people groups. Not boundaries, borders that have been put up by man, but people groups. Facebook is a people group. Instagram is a people group. TikTok is a people group. YouTube is a people group. 2.9 billion people on Facebook worldwide. That's a country. A big country.
Sure.
Right. South African screen time is number 1 in the world. We are above America, above Europe, above any other nation you can think of. South Africans spend, guys, and I'm going to just listen to this. This is insane. 10 hours, 46 minutes.
Well, I wasn't far off. All right. Wow.
That is madness.
My goodness.
Now, what are we doing with all those guys on that screen time? Are we reaching them? Are our political parties reaching them? And this is what I say to guys. I don't endorse the EFF, but they are very good at using screen time to reach people.
Sure.
That is why they've got such a young, dynamic following.
Yeah.
Even if it's a whole lot of garbage, and I don't mind saying that, because what they spew is nothing but hate speech. They should be really looked at for what they say. They belittle everyone. They even belittle themselves sometimes, which is absolutely stupid, but I don't understand it. But guys, 10 hours a day on our screens, this is what South Africans are spending. What are you doing as an individual to reach people through your screen? I like to say this to young people. If I have to take your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed and throw it up onto a screen, we always talk about going to heaven and God puts our life up onto a screen for everyone to see or for us to watch. If I have to take your Facebook feed and I have to throw it up onto a wall, and I don't know who you are from a bar of soap, Instagram feed, whatever, what am I going to see there? Am I going to see, now I'm speaking to Christians especially, because we are supposed to be at the forefront of everything if we are going into all nations, to basically lay down our lives for our brother and be there as Christians for people. What are you doing? If I throw up your feed, what am I going to see? Am I going to see a whole bunch of pictures of you brushing your teeth, pictures of your food, pictures of you shopping, pictures of you in a bathroom in a hotel somewhere, which I don't know why people take pictures of themselves in bathrooms in the mirror, but you can see the bathroom stalls behind them. I don't understand that. But maybe it's because it's just a mirror there. That's a big mirror. I don't have one of these in my house. I can take a full picture. I don't know what it is, but guys, if I say to you, go online and let me have a look at your feed. Go online, look at my feeds, please. Go and have a look. I'm not active, but I put quality content out consistently, not just of me talking nonsense and spewing stuff at people because I'm a Christian. No, I want people to see how I'm living my life Monday to Saturday. And that's what social media is. It's how we live our lives every single day.
Absolutely.
Throwing up your feed, is Christ portrayed in your feed? Not through you talking for 5 minutes on TikTok as a TikTok pastor, but through them just seeing you going to the shop, living your life, doing community-based service work as Christians are supposed to be involved with, and then maybe commenting on social issues that need to be commented on and not keeping quiet. Are we seeing Christ? Are we seeing the love of Christ portrayed in our social media feeds? I'm going to leave that as an open-ended question because I don't know. I'm going to say right now, I don't know. Because 80% Christians in South Africa, 10 hours of screen time a day, there should be so much Christian information and content out there on our social platforms in South Africa with 10 hours of screen time and 80% Christians.
Absolutely.
Guys, use your screens. Use it as the tool that it's meant to be used for. And Pastor Wayne, I just want to say thank you very much for your time. I know that you're an extremely busy man. And for you to come out and spend this amount of time with me here in Rondebosch is absolutely amazing. I have enjoyed every minute of it. I have soaked up everything that you've had to say. And the awesome thing for me is I get to go and edit this video and watch it again over and over and over. So I can get this into my head because I'm ADHD. I don't remember anything. I will understand this man more and more from this conversation. So guys, watch this. Comment, like, share. We don't like talking to screens here. We are talking to people. We want your engagement. We want you to, whether you agree or disagree, let us know. We want to create constructive dialogue so that we can start talking about issues. Pastor Wayne, the floor is yours for the last few minutes. Open up your heart. Final comments and remarks from you as a father, as a politician, as a man of God, as a community leader, as a church leader, as a husband. What do you have to say to the young South Africans?
Vaughan, let me just come back again to our manifesto, the ACDP manifesto, and then I'll wrap up. One of the things I spoke about earlier was the aspect of beneficiation, and as being a champion of the beneficiation policy. We export too many of our raw materials. We've got to create opportunities, businesses in South Africa where we retain the raw materials here, develop industries around those raw materials, whether it's platinum, whether it's gold, whether it's coal, whether it's our diamonds, create industries around that where our young people are able to actually get jobs. South Africans that are unemployed, we have one of the largest unemployment rates in the world, almost on the expanded definition of unemployment, over 40% of able-bodied South Africans are unemployed. Youth unemployment is around 60% or so. Some say maybe even 70%. So we've got to address this challenge, and that is able to be done via beneficiation. I'm not able to unpack every aspect of our manifesto, but I want to encourage you to go onto the ACDP website, have a look at our manifesto.
acdp.org.za.
acdp.org.za. Have a look at what we are saying about our manifesto. But then look at as the ACDP, we are one of the fastest growing political parties in the country. Currently, the 6th largest political party in national parliament. and the
Wow.
ACDP continues to grow. We're a party that is established in all 9 provinces around the country. So we're not a regionally based party like some political parties. You only find them maybe KZN or Western Cape, whatever the case is. We are in all 9 provinces. We have structures in all 9 provinces. We are not a personality based party. We are not a party that is ethnically based. We have individuals from all walks of life that are members of the ACDP, supporters of the ACDP. Our ACDP policy also is freedom of religion. By the way, while we espouse a biblical worldview, but there are people from different religions that actually support the ACDP because of our moral base. And so we are saying that the ACDP is a political party that has heard the cry of South Africans, the SOS, service, order, safety, and we are here to address that. To the young people, I want to say to you that Winston Churchill, after the Second World War, was asked to come and give a speech to some university graduates. It was the shortest and yet the most profound speech that he had ever given. He came to the platform as those who had graduated were standing there, and what he said to them was, never, ever, ever, ever give up. And he sat down. That was his speech. The students stood up. They applauded. They say it was the longest applause that Winston Churchill ever received. It was his shortest, and yet within that short speech, the most profound, because so many of young people in South Africa feel like giving up.
Yeah.
I want to say to you, to the young people of South Africa, to those who are going through difficulties, perhaps even not so young, never give up. God has never given up on you. He will never give up on you. He is the friend. Jesus is our friend who sticketh closer than a brother. There is a future for South Africa if we as South Africans, and particularly I'm speaking now to the Christians in South Africa, stand together, bandy together, understand our mandate. South Africa can become a model nation, not only to the continent, on the continent of Africa, but to the rest of the world. It is possible if we stand together and if we put in place able, capable, trustworthy, those who hate dishonest gain, and those who fear God, and put those in positions of authority. South Africa can be turned around.
Well, guys, I'm about to start crying from that very, very short comment at the end there, because what Pastor Wayne has said is very, very, very relevant to echo Winston Churchill, to never, ever, 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 ever give up. And the thing is, the government wants you to give up. The current government, anyway. They want you to be beholden to them. They want you to be plugged into them through social grant systems and everything. And we're saying there's nothing wrong with a social grant, but if it's taking the place of a full-time job, then all of a sudden you need the government to provide for you. We are saying that you need to be able to provide for yourself, make your own way, and the only way to do that is to do and listen to guys like Pastor Wayne who are capable, who are well educated, who understand the heart of the people. You must understand, when the Bible said to us, you will do greater things than Jesus, it wasn't greater miracles. For me anyway, it's not about doing greater miracles and raising people from the dead and having the lame walk. That is awesome. For me, the greatest thing Jesus ever did was lay down his life.
Wow.
So that I could choose him. Now I ask myself, what can I do greater than that? And yet the Bible says that I must do greater things. That means that I must be willing, just like Jesus completed the law in the New Testament. He said, that's why it's so profound for me. Love one another and lay down your life for your brother. If we don't love each other as we love ourselves, then how are we supposed to lay down our lives? And laying down my life doesn't mean that I have to die. If I die, I know where I'm going. I'm going to go be with my Father in heaven. But laying down my life means to put myself last. Being able to be spat on, kicked, ridiculed, shouted at, but at the end of the day, make a difference. Starting with that individual when you walk out your front door, changing that heart, changing that family, changing that community, and in turn, changing the nation. But we need to have parties like the ACDP out there who are not... I mean, I'm pretty sure that the ACDP would love to win a national election and be the ruling party. But I'm pretty sure that's not their number one goal, because if you look at their manifesto and you read what principles are in that manifesto and what they are campaigning for, it is basic human rights that over the last 30 years have been eroded and taken away from us through useless policy and through people who don't see further than their own noses because they are not worried about the community. They are worried about lining their couches. Their pockets are now too small, so they are now buying big couches to put all the money in. And that is me being very funny, but it's at the same time being very serious, because unless we have leaders of integrity, unless we have fathers who understand what families are about, who have children, we won't see the country changing. And we are not talking to the minority here. Oh, we passed away, 80% Christian.
Sure.
We are talking to the majority of South Africans. If you are like-minded in mind, body and spirit with us, look into politics, look into civil governance, understand what it truly means to be a politician. It means servant, not ruler and instigator and person who's wanting to store up wealth for themselves, but rather giving it back to the communities. So that is my final 10 cents. I don't know if Pastor Wayne, you want to say anything more, maybe just say goodbye to everyone and final remarks.
Well, Vaughan, I just want to say thank you. It's been a pleasure being with you, being able to interact on this particular podcast. I just trust that the thoughts that we've shared resonates with those who would actually listen. And, you know, the word encourages us not only to be hearers, but also doers. One of the challenges that we have as we approach the upcoming elections on the 29th of May is that there's a huge percentage, somewhere in the region of about 10 million people or so, who registered to vote but did not exercise their right to vote. And if they did, we possibly would have a change of government, and hopefully it would be a government which is righteous, like the ACDP, that has a biblical worldview and wants to see the kingdom of God being made manifest on earth as it is in heaven. And so I want to encourage each and every one on the 29th of May, go out, make your choice, put your cross next to the ACDP, a political party that holds fast to biblical values and that has your rights and your future at heart.
Yes, guys, if you don't think one vote counts, I'm not going to give you the history. Go and check out history and go Google how many times one vote made a difference to change a regime. There are countless movements and specific time periods in history where things were changed by one vote difference.
Yeah.
One vote difference. You can be that one vote difference if you decide to now, 29th of May, vote. So from Pastor Wayne Thring and from myself, the Cyber Hitchhiker, as I always do at the end of my episodes and podcasts and videos and everything else that I do, it's goodbye and God bless.